Hi everyone, okay, my name's Anthony Cummins and this is how I personally think samurai used to train in the old days. Now this is going to be a bit of a longer video, so this is one of those where you've got to get yourself a cup of tea, maybe a snack. I've even got my tea on a light stand here to keep it warm, and I'm going to give you an introduction first and then go into it. So it's going to be a bit one of those longer ones. So first things first, let's do the first things. If you want to know about samurai training, how real samurai used to really live their lives and do their stuff, you need to get this. This is the book one of the Book of Samurai series by Natoru Ryu. Get that straight away. The second thing I'm going to say is that I have run the reincarnation of Natoru Ryu, and at the side of the video, I'm not sure it's all changed, but probably that side or maybe that side, I'm going to run a series of photographs to keep you entertained while you're bored by my monotonous tone. And that will show you the training that we do in Natoru Ryu. And there should be a little thing on the bottom of the screen which says how you can get hold of us and get in contact. So that is what's going to happen there. But I also want to remind you of people out there who are absolutely training and trying to get up and keep up to date with the research and everything. And we've got Matthew Okuhara. Now I'm going to show you a couple of videos of Matthew out there training. Here we go.
とてもいい。
So basically, Matthew is actually living in Japan. He's married to a Japanese wife. He's becoming the head of his family. He does horse riding. He owns armor, and he is a member of the gun core group of Matsumoto Castle. He's absolutely out there getting to grips with samurai training. So there's that other way. So make sure you follow Matthew's channel, which is Gun Samurai. It's on Instagram, and it's also on Instagram, and it's also on YouTube here. So please go and find Matthew and follow him. You're missing a load of great videos if you don't. Okay, so we're just past the 2-minute mark. That's the introduction, and now we are going to talk about how did a ninja actually train. So let's start with a bit of the tea. I hope you've paused this video and got your brew too, because we're going to be here for some time. No, probably not. It's not going to be that long. Right. So I've been asked the question, how did samurai and ninja actually train? Also, let's take guesses on what time the postman comes. The postman always comes when I'm doing a video. So how did they train? Now, we get this idea of the wooden walled Japanese dojo with the samurai training inside of it. But how did it realistically happen? Now, first of all, you've got to discuss landscape and chronology. So basically, landscape is the world that they lived in, their social setup, their political setup, their social setup, their geographical locations, and also their where they are in time, their chronology. So basically, what's happening politically at the time, when are the samurai coming together, and I'll explain why those things are very important. Now, today, most samurai schools that you find are swordsmanship. Nearly all of them are swordsmanship. Some are hand-to-hand combat, most are swordsmanship, very few are spear, a couple are gun, like not many are gun, and there's only one, and by the way, in those they have some little offshoot bits, but there's only one, which is Natoru Ryu at the minute, which is teaching all the other stuff, basically, hence why I did the book, that we're running all the other stuff. Now, the reason I say that is because I've brought it back. It's not that Natoru Ryu continued. They too went down and disintegrated and stopped. And I went around Japan getting all the scrolls together and bringing them back. So that's why you're seeing at the side the pictures of the different styles of training. Fire training, the water training, star mapping, castle construction. All of those things were done by samurai. So let's go right back to the beginning. The samurai start in about the year, let's just say the year 1000 for ease of argument. They probably start a little bit earlier, but they're not like boom and there's the samurai. What did samurai do then? Well, first of all, the center is around Kyoto, but the people in Kyoto are actually, oh no, let me go back even further. So basically, the start of the samurai, they don't just miraculously invent samurai martial arts. They came from a Chinese-based system. So the Chinese systems of infantry fighting, cavalry possibly, gunnery, in the sense of the use of fireworks, if you like, rockets, hand grenades, you know, anything to do with gunpowder. They definitely had that, but we know that they were very much surprised by it by the time we get to the Mongol invasion of the 1300s. So it looks like it disappeared from the Chinese infantry army style. Whether it was there originally, how far back it went, I'm not sure, but they definitely had a Chinese style stuff. So we assume it was there because they used to have the Oyumi, which was the big catapult crossbow, but they lost it. So bit by bit, the Chinese technology was lost. But then the Japanese started to build their own armor, their own type of swords, their own type of cavalry movements, and they moved on, but took some of that Chinese system with them, the art of war, etc. Now, what we don't know is what type of swordsmanship they actually did for the first 400 years, maybe 500 years. There are three main schools. I'm going to talk about this in my next video as well. There are three main schools. I've got them here: Kage Ryu, Nen Ryu, Shinto Ryu. And I've got this information kindly from Alex from Taisha Ryu, who will talk about more in the future. And I'll link you to his stuff. But basically, you get these swordsmanship schools that come around in the 1400s. But that's not to say they are mega powerful by that stage. That's just say their origins start. And sometimes, in all honesty, the origins of schools are pushed back 100 years or so. They're all, most of the time, they're not as old as they say they are. For example, Nato Ryu says it goes back to the ancient Chinese and all that. It doesn't. It starts probably in the 1500s at the earliest. You know what I mean? That's not to say it wasn't passed on. There was echoes of it. But as an organised body of information, it wasn't started till later. So basically, we've got 400 years of how did the samurai train? No idea. Nobody knows really, but we know they had combat, we know they had archery, we know they did swordsmanship, we know they did spear work, and they did start to adopt gunpowder. Comes back into it. Whether it comes back into it or it was never there, we're not quite sure. Well, I'm not quite sure, but basically they start to adopt gunpowder before the rifle, and then they bring the rifle in, the musket in the 1555 or something like that. 53, whatever it is. It's that day, I'm sure somebody will put it there. And that's when they start to get modern Western guns. So for 400 years, we've got a blank slate of not much. We don't really know much beyond the epics, like they came out and they clashed swords and they did this. So what we know is that politically and from the landscape, they were centered around Kyoto, but there's lots of samurai all over and they're fighting the barbarians in the north. That's why you get the shogun. The shogun is the barbarian quelling general. So what it means is that the barbarians are coming down through where, you know, from the north through the east to the west of Japan, because Japan goes that way, and the shogun is given his sword for say a couple of months and they say, you're shogun, off you go and kill them. And we know they go out in cavalry and they go out and they do their stuff. There's the golden age of challenges, but that's a little bit of a formality, probably an overshoot from Chinese. So basically, we've got this 400 years where not much, we don't really know what's going on. But what we do know, what we can infer, is that people are living in isolated places. I read an amazing paper from an academic, and it says he didn't believe that cities actually existed till much later in Japan. We know that the first full castle keep didn't come until Nobunaga, and that's after the Westerners come. So didn't the Westerners say, you know what, Nobunaga, probably you should build, this is an English castle, there you go. So most likely Japanese castle keeps are at least influenced by Western people. So before that you had like hill forts with just spikes all over them, and you've got bushes and things like that, and they cut the trees down and use the trees, much like an Iron Age fort in the UK. So you've got that sort of thing going on. So you should check the Iron Age forts versus the Japanese castles. They're very much like that in the early days. And you get, what happens is village is even too much. You get hamlets that exist, farm hamlets. So imagine you're going over rolling hills and there's like the farmers 3 miles that way, one farmer's 3 miles that way, there's a small community 6 miles that way, and the samurai goes round collecting all their taxes and doing all their stuff because that's their job. The samurai literally control the money of the government. The government's in Kyoto, they're going around doing their stuff, bringing it all back. So we have this very sparse population. Now, they're not going to go to the local dojo. They're not going 6 miles down the road every morning to have a thingy, or 20 miles to do. So we must infer that originally samurai were studying in their own homes with their own extended family, say 20 or 30 people in the household, women, children, grandma, granddad, you know. I'm sure some academic has done an actual check of that, but let's just call it an extended 20 to 30 family with, say, 5 or 6, maybe 10 fighting men of fighting age who go to the area in their house that they train, outside, inside, whatever, the mountains. They'll train horse riding, shooting, swordsmanship, all of that. Now, this continues up until pretty much you start getting into the 1500s, and then we start to see the development of bigger cities coming in. Osaka, and obviously Kyoto is the main capital, so you do have Kyoto, but we start to see Osaka coming in and all the different, and then later in the 1500s Tokugawa starts to make a base in Edo, and this Kamakura starts coming together in the 1300s. So we start to get these from mainly individual places. I'm not saying there was never any towns or central points of trade. What I'm saying is there's port trade, there's town trade, but most of the samurai across all of Japan are in the countryside, in the hills, and not in a town separated out. So what happens is, bit by bit, those centres of trade and the merchant class start to rise and come together, and the wars are happening. Then we start to see, even at this point though, even in the Sengoku period, they still have to send out jimbori, orders to war. Somebody has to ride out to the farmsteads. Right, you're going to war. Going to war. And it says, so, in fact, actually, in this book, it says you might be given a year's notice, or you might be given a week's notice, or you might just be told to get on your horse and go, depending on the plan of the strategy of the clan. So basically, we have samurai all over the country. This means that they're not coming together every Tuesday and Friday to practice this one ryuha. They've got their own family tradition. Drink, because he's talking far too much. So, no postman yet. So, basically, you've got this idea that suddenly, bit by bit, we start to get big cities. As I said, Osaka, Kamakura coming in, and we start to now attack cities, and instead of moving forces, and then the battlefield gets more and more cramped. Now, what happens here is, as people start living closer together, swordsmanship or schools start to develop and become popular. And the next thing you know, instead of training with your extended family, there's a guy across the road who's a sword master, and you're like, well, I'll pay him a bit of money and he'll teach me. And then bit by bit, now Alex's theory is that as sword duels happened and one sword school was outdone by another sword school, then that sword school sort of moved away or disappeared, and then the students went to this sword school. So from thousands of schools, which is my point, there's many schools in Japan, ancient schools, they start to build into clusters and groups. Now, this must go exactly with the same as the land starts to grab together. And as communities come together, schools start to come together. This is only theory, but it's a good guesstimate. And then bit by bit, as cities get bigger and bigger, the schools start to get more and more. There's less of them, but they are bigger. And we start to get bigger schools now. And we actually start to get groups of people. Now we start to get Ronin coming in together and forming political groups. Now, one thing that you don't realise is a lot of training is based off Ronin coming together and teaching their skills to other people to make money. Because being a Ronin was not a bad thing until a certain point in history. It's only bad for about 50 years. Beyond that, being a Ronin is totally fine. You're still samurai. So the next step is that the Ronin are building theirs, the samurai come together. Now we get Sekigahara, and Sekigahara changes all of Japan. And the next thing, Tokugawa takes over, and we get this idea that all the samurai are ordered in to come in from the hills and live in cities. And now you have a total change in the way that samurai live. They used to be in the hills. Now there's the city, and you get the merchants' quarters, the blacksmith area. the samurai area. Gates on each one, and the next thing you know, all the samurai living together. And now the provinces, because they're at peace, they start building big dojos. So I totally forgot. Anyway, Muboshi Ryu are there, Kanizawa. So Kanizawa, basically they build a big dojo, and Muboshi Ryu, which is one of the schools I've personally tracked down and sorted out, was they were teaching their jiu-jitsu on such a day. It was literally Tuesday and Thursday night. After your work, you go to jiu-jitsu lessons. So for those of you out there who are going to jiu-jitsu lessons on a Tuesday, Thursday, or Friday, Saturday, you're doing exactly what the samurai did in the Sengo, in the Edo period. They had a dojo curriculum, and they'd be like, on this day, I'm going to learn about castle construction. On this day, I'm going to learn about how to do swordsmanship in this style. And then they never tended to cross over swordsmanship, but they did have different schools. You could approach different schools. You could go to a spearman school, a swordsman school, a castle school. You could totally change. So we start to get a big formalization of all the schools. The schools are really formalized. Then we start to get the curriculums written down, and people are putting their thumbprints on everything, and this master's there, and challenges between schools have stopped. But we start to get the rise of the kendo style culture. Let's have bouts with armor and bamboo swords, and it's the swords get longer, and the tsuba, the handguard, gets bigger. And we've got documentation that by the 1850s, it's so ridiculous that people are like tapping each other, and they've got big plate like things, and they've got helmet padded on, and they're all like slapping each other and jumping around, and there's all that going on. So the question, how did samurai train, depends on landscape and depends on time. So if we're going back to the beginning of the days, samurai are probably sat in their houses with their uncles, their fathers, their cousins, and they've got their own school, their own family school, their own system. They don't call it a ryuha because that word doesn't come into play yet, but they have their own family building with their own special way of fighting that they have developed or picked up as they've gone along with other people or distant relatives. We then start to see battlefields coming closer, more dense, and martial arts starts to change, and we start to see the development of massive urban areas where purpose-built dojos are for people to go and train in. And then we start to see the decline of martial arts into what's known as flowery martial arts, where it's more of a Zen style skill display, and less of a reality-based system. It divides into flowery kata, and then into tapping kendo style formulation. We then know that in World War II, there's actually a document, and there's actually a paper done on a guy interviewed all the swordsmen who'd come back from World War II, Japanese swordsmen, and they said, can you tell us about real swordsmanship? And they said, well, actually, kendo doesn't prepare you for real swordsmanship. Actually, it makes you too far away, and you need to get in close. And again, back to this book, back to the 1600s, he's saying people are losing the way of how to train. You need to get in close. You need to be the same distance to punch someone as to cut someone, because by the time you've cut and moved, they've moved, you're actually only hitting with this part of the blade. So these in World War II were actually doing the bouncy kendo stuff, and they were realizing they were just missing because they're aiming for the wrong part. So what we do is, if you want to envisage how samurai train, hopefully the pictures have been going on at the side of me. I don't know if they've stopped by this point, but basically samurai will train. I've tried to rebuild it, guys, so that actually what happens is you'll have a dojo that you go to and learn hand-to-hand combat, swordsmanship, spearsmanship. You will go outside, just like Matthew does, and shoot guns. You will learn about how to move in formation. You'll learn how to fight in spears in formation. You'll go out at night and study how to navigate by the stars. You will learn to climb over walls, start fires, and scouting, horse riding, flag maneuvers, signals, conch shells, flutes, all that type of thing. You will learn to do signals, to do all of the warfare. You'll also learn about studying chi, how to see chi and chi in buildings. You will start to see omens. You'll look at lucky days and unlucky days. You'll know how to fight on horseback, how not to fight on horseback, how to commit suicide, how to help someone commit suicide, how to undermine a castle, how to get over a castle, how to check the trajectory of arrows from the castle. All of these things are in Natori, you guys. So the pictures at the side, if they're still going, are actually how samurai should train, because I've specifically designed the resurrection of this school to be as close to what it would be originally without us actually going back in time. So that is how a samurai would train. So I hope whoever asked that question, that answers your question. And I hope for you guys, that gives you something to think about. Now, the postman has not arrived. I've still got a full pot of tea. Let me show you my pot of tea without me dropping it. So there's my pot of tea. So it's I'll need it after I've just had that long spillage of Cummins dross. A dross is actually a proper word, and it means pretty much like crappy things you say. So there you go, guys. So if you want to train like a samurai, get out in the wilderness, get in the dojo, get academic, start thinking about artistic pursuits, learn about the parts of armor and the parts of sword, and just pull it all together. Right, guys, there you go. See you later.